Tyreek Hill's knee injury is now looking far more serious than NFL fans originally thought. What first sounded like a bad setback has reportedly turned into multiple torn ligaments, 2 surgeries, and a recovery so brutal that people are starting to question whether the cheetah will ever fully return to football again. On September 29, 2025, Hill suffered a season-ending injury on national television during the Dolphins' 27-21 victory over the New York Jets and was taken to a local hospital. A knee dislocation on Monday Night Football in front of the entire country, while Miami was picking up what would turn out to be one of the few wins they would get all season. The wideout suffered the ugly injury while being tackled along the sideline by Jets defensive back Malachi Moore. It was a bang-bang play. Hill going for yards after the catch, Moore making a tackle. Nothing on its face that screamed career-altering, but the way Hill went down and the way his legs sat at an angle that no leg should sit. The sideline cleared, players from both teams turned away, and within minutes, he was in an ambulance. His agent, Drew Rosenhaus, said he rode in the ambulance to the hospital with Hill in the second half. The first time he has ever done that with a client. That detail alone should tell you everything about the temperature in that stadium, in that ambulance, and in every Miami Dolphins fan's home at that moment. When a veteran NFL agent who has seen everything, handled everything, and been through the wars of 100 injuries, rides in an ambulance for the first time in his career, something is very wrong. Rosenhaus laid out the questions doctors were running through in an interview with WSVN in Miami that aired after the game. Are there any torn ligaments? Is there torn cartilage? Are there any broken bones? To check on the blood flow. Any, God forbid, nerve damage? All of this is getting checked out. We don't know the extent of the injury. Doctors have told me he dislocated his knee. The word dislocated was doing a lot of heavy lifting in those first few hours, because to the casual football fan, a dislocation sounds like something that gets snapped back into place, and then you ice it for a week. The reality is completely different. A knee dislocation is a rare but severe injury. There is typically trauma to some of the main stabilizing ligaments: the anterior cruciate ligament, the posterior cruciate ligament, the medial collateral ligament, and the lateral collateral ligament. So when Rosenhaus was saying he did not know the extent of the damage, what he was really saying was, we don't know yet which combination of those 4 critical structures just got destroyed inside Tyreek Hill's knee. Earlier reports also emphasized urgent evaluation of blood flow and nerve function, given the danger of vascular compromise in knee dislocations. And that is the part of the story that most people glossed over. The popliteal artery is located behind the knee. Trauma to the knee can injure the artery and threaten blood flow to the lower leg. If the artery is damaged, prompt surgical repair is critical. Concern for the artery in particular is the reason athletes suffering knee dislocations are immediately transported to the hospital for further imaging and evaluation. This was not just an orthopedic emergency. In the worst-case scenarios, knee dislocations can compromise the blood supply to the leg entirely. The football injury had, within seconds, become a conversation about much more than football. Hill would likely miss at least the remainder of the 2025 regular season after suffering a dislocated left knee in Monday night's win over the Jets. It was a massive blow to a Dolphins team that picked up its first win of the season, but now had to claw back from a 1-3 record without a player who had been the NFL's preeminent home run threat for the past decade. Teammates were shell-shocked. Miami running back Devon Achane said of losing Hill after Monday's game, "Next man up. We've just got to make sure we stay ahead of the sticks. I feel like anybody on this team, when they got the ball in their hands, they can make plays. We just got to practice and just got to face the fact that we might not have him." Face the fact that we might not have him. That phrasing, not until he comes back, but we might not have him, from a teammate who saw it up close. That is a team processing the possibility that what they just watched might be the last time they see Tyreek Hill play football. Hill's dislocated knee had multiple torn ligaments, including his ACL, ending his season 4 games into the 2025 campaign. Dolphins head coach Mike McDaniel confirmed later Tuesday that Hill would miss the rest of the season after tearing multiple knee ligaments. Hill underwent surgery on Tuesday. The confirmation arrived the morning after the game. Multiple ligaments, including the ACL, season over. Those were the facts, and they were delivered with the clinical bluntness that the NFL uses when the news is bad enough that adjectives would only make it worse. But the medical community was already trying to explain to fans just how serious this combination of injuries actually was. An isolated ACL tear or meniscus injury is much more common in sports and often less immediately limb-threatening. In Hill's case, the reports suggest a complex multi-ligament injury compounded by dislocation, raising a host of urgent concerns. Think about the last decade of sports injuries you have heard about. The ACL tear that kept a star out for a year, the MCL sprain, the meniscus surgery. Those are the standard currency of sports medicine. What Hill suffered was a different category entirely. A full knee dislocation with multiple structural failures at the same time. Because knee dislocations are uncommon, the full constellation of damage, cartilage, meniscus, bone fragments, nerve injury, may only become fully clear during surgery itself or on advanced imaging. There was a historical parallel that circulated immediately, and it was not a comforting one. In 2015, as a sophomore at Georgia, Nick Chubb dislocated his left knee, tearing the MCL, LCL, and PCL, three of the four primary stabilizing ligaments of the knee, and sustaining cartilage damage. As devastating as that injury was, Chubb was fortunate not to suffer nerve or arterial damage. He had reconstructive surgery, rehabbed his knee, and returned to play the 2016 season, during which he posted over 1,000 yards rushing for the Bulldogs. After another 1,000-yard season as a senior, Chubb was drafted by the Cleveland Browns. But even the Nick Chubb comparison carried its own cautionary tale baked in. In his sixth season with the Browns, Chubb suffered a similarly devastating injury to the same knee, this time sustaining damage to the ACL, MCL, medial meniscus, and medial joint capsule. The second injury required 2 surgeries to repair, but Chubb was fortunate to escape nerve and artery damage. Remarkably, he returned to limited action in 2024 for the Browns, then signed with the Texans in 2025 as a free agent. Chubb is a power running back. His entire game is built on contact, on running through defenders, on the physical brutality of his position. Hill's game is built on something far more fragile and far more irreplaceable: his speed. Because Hill is one of the fastest receivers in the game, the rehab must not only restore basic function, but also elite-level speed, cut, and deceleration capacity with no allowance for residual laxity or hesitation. That is the terrifying part of this entire story. You can repair a ligament. You can reconstruct a knee. What you cannot guarantee is that a 32-year-old man who ran a 4.29-second 40-yard dash will run that same time again after his left knee was disassembled and put back together. The surgery went well, according to NFL Network insider Tom Pelissero, who reported via Hill's agent Drew Rosenhaus. According to Rosenhaus, everything was done with one procedure, as multiple surgeries were considered a possibility. That was the first sigh of relief, everything done in one procedure. No arterial damage, no immediate need for vascular surgery, no second operation on the horizon, at least not right away. Rosenhaus added that the goal was for Hill to be back by the start of 2026. That was the optimistic number, the one the agent and the team wanted out there. Start of the 2026 season. 9-10 months of rehab. Get ready. Come back. But the doctors and the sports medicine community were already casting doubt on whether that timeline was even realistic. Hill's agent Drew Rosenhaus said surgery went well, and additional surgery would not be necessary, as is sometimes the case with a knee dislocation, and that the goal would be to be ready week 1. But sources cast doubt on such a speedy return from such a devastating injury, even if another surgery ultimately was not needed. The initial optimism did not last. While Rosenhaus was telling the world that everything went well in one procedure and week 1 of 2026 was the target, Tyreek Hill himself would eventually let the truth slip out, and it told a different story. Hill said on a live stream, "My recovery is going good, bro. Like I said earlier in the stream, I gotta have one more surgery." He added, "It hasn't been as rough as people try to make it seem, you know what I'm saying? But I'll say, me, filling my time with DJ and traveling to all these different places, it has been a lot easier for myself. I'm just enjoying my life. I'm enjoying myself." Hill's agent had previously stated that the expectation was that the wide receiver would be ready for the 2026 season. However, the second surgery likely means his timeline is unclear. There it was, a second surgery, the thing Rosenhaus said would not be necessary in those initial hours after the first procedure. The thing that when it materializes after a knee dislocation opens up every uncomfortable question about timelines, about return to play, and about whether the knee is actually stable at all. The one more surgery revelation landed with the weight of everything it implied, because the context of Hill's injury is not just medical, it is also financial and contractual. And all three of those things were about to crash into each other with tremendous force. The five-time first-team All-Pro was in the second year of a 3-year contract extension with Miami, and league sources expected the Dolphins to release Hill before the start of the next league year in March 2026. That expectation had been circulating since the day of the injury itself. The numbers simply did not work. Hill was certainly living up to the 4-year extension he got from the Dolphins, which was reportedly worth up to $120 million. At the time, he was made the highest paid receiver in the NFL. But in 2026, Hill was set to be a whopping $51 million cap hit. $51 million for a 32-year-old receiver coming off a dislocated knee, who needed 2 surgeries and whose return date was now genuinely uncertain. The math was not close. According to NFL Network's Tom Pelissero, a major contract deadline was approaching on March 13th that would force the team to commit to a massive payout. Pelissero noted, as for wide receiver Tyreek Hill, he also has a trigger on March 13th. $16 million would be locked in. He is coming off a major injury. It is unclear at this point when, or even if Tyreek will be ready to play in 2026. The health, plus his age at 32, plus the money, all would point to Tyreek, at least for now, being out in Miami. And then the Miami Dolphins organization itself was changing shape around Hill as he rehabbed. The franchise was in a very different place. It had a new coach in Jeff Hafley and a new general manager in John Eric Sullivan. It had missed the playoffs in consecutive seasons after reaching the postseason in the previous 2. Sullivan was adamant on establishing a new culture within the Dolphins building, and that usually involves significant roster moves. Sullivan is a believer in developing through the draft. Hill was not part of that new culture's vocabulary. Hill hit the trifecta for players bound to be cut: age, injury, and bloated salary. So the Dolphins made the easy decision, with a new regime less inclined to worry about sentiment. Meanwhile, the player himself was processing all of this in public, not through press conferences or formal statements, but through social media, live streams, and a new hobby that started raising eyebrows across the NFL world. In November, Hill posted on X, "Coming to play house music near you." The 8-time Pro Bowler then hinted further at a transition into DJing, posting footage on social media of himself working a Pioneer DDJ 1000 controller. The NFL world did a double take. Was the cheetah done with football? On the Set podcast, Hill said that he was at least contemplating retirement. And then, on the same podcast hosted by former teammate Teron Armstead, Hill elaborated in a way that made it clear this was not just a man bored during rehab. "At the end of the day, I feel like that decision is based upon how I feel and where my mindset is at the moment," he said. "I'm happy with the career that I've had. I love playing football. I love it, but it takes a lot. It takes a lot on you mentally. It takes a lot on you physically." The DJ thing, the retirement talk, the second surgery, all of it was beginning to paint a very different picture than the "he'll be ready week 1" message that came out of surgery the previous September. On February 16, 2026, Hill was released by the Dolphins. It was President's Day, and within hours, every story that had been building since September 29, 2025, arrived at its logical conclusion. Hill entered free agency ahead of his age 32 season, with 11,363 yards and 83 touchdowns on 819 career receptions, the greatest statistics of any receiver of his era, and no team to play for. Miami was releasing wide receiver Tyreek Hill. Hill, an 8-time Pro Bowler and 5-time All-Pro, was rehabbing from a major leg injury suffered during the 2025 season, and it was unclear when or if he would play in 2026. The numbers the Dolphins saved were significant. By cutting Hill and 3 others in a series of cost-cutting decisions, the Dolphins saved nearly $70 million in cap space ahead of next season. Hill responded on Instagram with the kind of message that sounded like a man who had been preparing for this moment, bracing for it, and channeling something into it. In a post on Instagram, Hill thanked the Dolphins, his teammates, and the team's fans. He also vowed that his career would continue. He wrote, "Every chapter in life has taught me something. This one taught me leadership, resilience, and mostly gratitude. The cheetah don't slow down ever. So to everyone wondering what's next, just wait on it. The cheetah will be back, born again. But his former teammate Jalen Waddle gave the public a window into what the rehab had actually looked like close up, and it was not the image of a man drifting toward retirement. Waddle went on the set with Taron Armstead, where he spoke about Hill following his release. Waddle said, "I can't say enough good things about Cheetah. When they signed him, the atmosphere of Hard Rock Stadium was totally different. He really embraced that and put it on his back." Waddle also shared a story on Hill's recovery and how he was already squatting 2 months after his dislocated knee injury, saying, "That boy different, he's gonna come back, Sreezy." You know Cheetah, he feels like people doubting him now, 2 months post-surgery. Squatting. That is not the recovery timeline of a man who has checked out. That is the recovery timeline of a man who has something to prove. But the free agent market told a different story. Unlike Tagovailoa, who was able to quickly secure a 1-year contract with the Atlanta Falcons, Hill had not signed with any NFL team and remained a free agent. Months after his release, he was still unsigned. Hill was the biggest name remaining in NFL free agency, but it was looking unlikely that the former All-Pro WR would be signing with a new team anytime soon. ESPN's Adam Schefter went on the Pat McAfee show and said it was likely that veteran free agent receivers like Hill, DeAndre Hopkins, and Deebo Samuel would play the waiting game to find a good landing spot. Some of these players will be able to hand-pick their opportunities right before training camp, or maybe they wait a week or two into camp to see if there's an injury, Schefter said. A lot of these guys haven't gotten the prices they want yet. Tyreek Hill has an injury situation where he might not be ready until midway through the season. That may be a down-the-line thing. Not be ready until midway through the season. That is the new timeline. Not week 1, not training camp. Midway through the season if he is ready at all. Hill's agent Drew Rosenhaus said his client was waiting until medical clearance to sign with a new team. He wants to play for a contender, and Rosenhaus pushed back on the noise, making the rounds to keep Hill's market warm. He had a really tough injury. This wasn't your run-of-the-mill ACL, Rosenhaus said during a recent appearance on the Stephen A. Smith Show. It was a multiple ligament injury, and he absolutely is on track for the start of the regular season. In talking to Tyreek, our focus is on him getting back to 100%. I spoke to his doctors recently. He's on point to be ready for the season. But the gap between what agents say and what doctors quietly tell teams in pre-signing physicals is where NFL careers go to die. And the market's silence was speaking louder than any interview. Now entering his age 32 season and in the midst of his recovery, the 8-time Pro Bowler had yet to find a new team. The most logical destination everyone kept circling back to was Kansas City. Hill to the Chiefs had long been the obvious choice. Hill had tremendous chemistry with Patrick Mahomes, and the duo won a Super Bowl together. In addition, the Chiefs rehired Eric Bieniemy as offensive coordinator this offseason. Hill had long been a supporter of Bieniemy and vice versa. Kansas City also had a need at receiver, particularly with Rashee Rice once again in legal trouble. Fox Sports' Ben Arthur wrote on May 19th about how a Hill return to the Chiefs still remained the most logical conclusion. Hill's status for 2026 remains unclear after dislocating his left knee and tearing multiple ligaments, including his ACL, last September. But after an unceremonious end to his Miami Dolphins tenure, a return to the Chiefs makes sense, health enabling. He would provide much-needed veteran depth for a wide receiver room that's seen uneven play since his departure from Kansas City in 2022. Health enabling, that qualifier did a lot of work in that sentence. The entire conversation about Tyreek Hill in 2026 had one asterisk attached to everything, and it was that knee. And now we arrive at the moment that made the NFL sit up and take notice all over again. The free agent wide receiver had announced that he was now a DJ in Miami. Hill had been mastering his craft while recovering from knee surgery and fell in love with EDM. Tyreek might have played his last down of football. That tweet from NFL insider Dov Kleiman on May 24, 2026 landed like a bomb. Not because it was the first time the DJ story had surfaced. It was not. But because of the language attached to it, Tyreek might have played his last down of football. That is not a neutral statement from a neutral observer. That is an NFL insider synthesizing months of information. The second surgery, the unsigned free agency, the DJ career, the retirement musings, and putting a sentence around all of it that the sports world had been afraid to say out loud. Let's take a step back and understand what Tyreek Hill's presence in the NFL actually meant, so that the weight of potentially losing him lands the way it should. A fifth-round pick in the 2016 NFL Draft, Hill quickly became one of the league's most dangerous deep threats and formed a near-unstoppable connection with Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. After dominating with them for 6 years, Hill joined the Miami Dolphins and proved he could dominate in a new environment. The wideout led the league in receiving yards and touchdowns in 2023 and solidified his status as one of the best receivers of his generation. Hill is one of the best wide receivers of his generation, with a resume that includes a Super Bowl title, 5 first-team All-Pro nods, and 8 Pro Bowl selections. But he will be 32 years old in 2026 and coming off a major injury. Since joining Miami in 2022, Hill generated 4,733 yards on 340 catches with 27 touchdowns, including a league-leading 1,799-yard, 13 TD 2023 season. And prior to that, in Kansas City, he was the single most important offensive weapon Patrick Mahomes had, the threat that made every other play in that offense possible. Hill is one of the rare players who has maintained his elite speed into his 30s, speed that kept him among the game's elite pass catchers. His significant knee injury could jeopardize that speed, and Hill himself did not shy away from the notion of retirement back in October. And this is where the DJ story stops being a quirky football sidebar and starts being something else entirely, because Hill did not stumble into DJing. He committed to it. He performed publicly. He spoke about it with the same energy and passion that he used to talk about route running and touchdowns. Hill revealed at an Adidas event, "So I actually just came from DJing. So I actually learned how to DJ 2 months ago. And I actually DJ'd my second time in front of a lot of people here at this Adidas event today." When asked if he was taking up music as his post-NFL career choice, Hill said, "Nah, not for real. It's just something that I'm doing in my pastime. I feel like I'm a guy who can do a lot, man. I love DJing. I love cars. So I also got my car dealership license. I'm also trying to get back into school. A car dealership license back in school. These are not the activities of a man who believes he has one more run left in the NFL. These are the activities of a man building a second life. Methodically, deliberately, and maybe with the quiet acceptance that the first one might be over. If he does ultimately pursue DJing professionally, Hill will follow in the footsteps of NBA legend Shaquille O'Neal, who launched a career in dubstep production and has since performed at Tomorrowland, EDC Las Vegas, and Lollapalooza, among other major festivals. The pattern is familiar. The athlete who gets hurt finds something else while rehabbing, and then never quite fully comes back. Sometimes it is because the body cannot get back to where it was. Sometimes it is because the mind finds something else to want. And sometimes it is because the body and the mind both arrive at the same conclusion at the same time. The sport took everything it could take, and it is okay to walk away. Here is where this story stands right now. In honest terms, Tyreek Hill has an injury situation where he might not be ready until midway through the season. That may be a down-the-line thing. He is still a free agent. He has had 2 surgeries on a knee that sustained one of the most severe injuries a football player can suffer. He is 32. He is DJing in Miami, and not a single NFL team has put a contract in front of him. That does not mean his career is over. Free agent wide receiver Tyreek Hill intends to play this season. After taking his time during rehabilitation from a torn ACL, his agent is out there doing the work. His former teammate Jalen Waddle is telling anyone who will listen that Hill was squatting 2 months after the surgery, and that he is going to come back with something to prove. And Hill's own words, "The cheetah don't slow down, ever," carry real weight. From a man who has defied expectations at every stage of a career, that started as a 5th-round pick with character concerns, and ended, or is perhaps ending, as one of the most prolific wide receivers in the history of professional football. But the honest verdict, based on everything that has unfolded since September 29th, 2025, is this: Tyreek Hill's knee injury was never just a knee injury. It was a dislocated joint, multiple torn ligaments, 2 surgeries, a second surgery that was not supposed to happen, a free agency with no takers, and a 32-year-old man falling in love with EDM in Miami. While the football world watches and waits whether the cheetah runs again, really runs the way he used to run, the way defenses had nightmares about, is a question that not even his doctors can answer right now. And the longer the silence from NFL front offices continues, the more it starts to sound like they may have already reached their own conclusions. The DJ booth might just be where this story ends, or it might be a chapter break before one of the most remarkable comebacks the sport has ever seen. Either way, the injury was worse than anyone thought, and we are all still waiting to find out exactly how much worse.